The Orknian Wars, a history. Good morning, class. Today we are going to learn about one of the most turbulent and tragic periods in our history, the Orknian Wars. The Orknian Wars were a series of wars that lasted for 5 years, from 1274 to 1279, and involved almost every kingdom in this region. The main aggressors were the orcs and goblins, who lived in the hills and mountains to the north, and who sought to conquer and enslave their neighbors. The wars ended with the destruction of the Orc kingdom and the death of thousands of people. The causes of the wars. The orcs and goblins had always been a threat to the other kingdoms, but they had never been united or organized enough to pose a serious danger. That changed in 1274, when a powerful and charismatic orc named Grashnak became the king of the orcs. Grashnak was a ruthless and ambitious leader who dreamed of creating a vast empire under his rule. He forged alliances with some of the goblin kingdoms, such as the Red Fangs and the Black Claws, and promised them wealth and glory if they joined his cause. Grashnak's main motivation for starting the wars was his desire to subjugate the other kingdoms and turn them into his slaves. He also coveted their lands, resources and treasures, and wanted to prove his superiority over them. He believed that the orcs and goblins were the true masters of this world, and that the other races were weak and inferior. Grashnak launched his first attack in 1274, when he invaded the kingdom of Ardinia, which was located to the east of the hills. Ardinia was a prosperous and peaceful kingdom, known for its fertile fields, rich mines, and skilled craftsmen. Grashnak's army swept through Ardinia like a storm, burning villages, plundering towns, and capturing people. The king of Ardinia, Elric, tried to resist, but he was outnumbered and outmatched by Grashnak's forces. He sent messengers to his allies asking for help, but none came in time. Grashnak reached the capital city of Ardinia, Ardenvale, and laid siege to it. After a month of fierce fighting, Ardenvale fell, and Grashnak took Elric prisoner. He ordered his men to kill every man in the city and to take every woman and child as slaves. He then declared himself the new king of Ardinia. The response of the other kingdoms. The fall of Ardinia shocked and alarmed the other kingdoms in the region. They realized that Grashnak was not going to stop at Ardinia, but would continue his conquest until he had subdued them all. They also feared that Grashnak would use Ardinia's resources and slaves to strengthen his army and make more weapons. The other kingdoms decided to form an alliance against Grashnak and to send their armies to liberate Ardinia and stop his advance. The alliance was led by King Roland of Valyria, who was Elric's brother-in-law and closest friend. Valyria was located to the south of Ardinia and was a powerful and wealthy kingdom, known for its trade, culture, and magic. Roland was a wise and brave king, who had a strong sense of justice and honor. The other members of the alliance were King Alden of Thalos, who ruled over a mountainous kingdom to the west of Valyria. Thalos was famous for its warriors, who were skilled in archery and swordsmanship. Queen Elena of Lyrian, who ruled over a forested kingdom to the southwest of Valyria. Lyrian was renowned for its druids, who had a deep connection with nature and could use its power. King Ewan of Illyria, who ruled over a coastal kingdom to the southeast of Valyria. Illyria was celebrated for its sailors, who explored the seas and traded with distant lands. King Garrett of Norea, who ruled over a plains kingdom to the northeast of Valyria. Norea was respected for its knights, who followed a strict code of chivalry and valor. The alliance gathered their forces at Valyria's capital city, Valirona, where they planned their strategy. They agreed to march northward together, with Roland as their commander-in-chief. The course of the wars. The alliance met Grashnak's army at Ardenia's border in 1275. The battle that followed was one of the largest and bloodiest in history. The alliance had more soldiers and better equipment, but the orcs and goblins had more ferocity and cunning. The battle lasted for 3 days, and ended with a narrow victory for the alliance. Grashnak was wounded and forced to retreat, but he managed to escape with most of his army. He also left behind a trail of destruction and death, as he burned and pillaged everything in his path. The alliance pursued Grashnak into the hills, where they faced more resistance from the orcs and goblins. The hills were a harsh and rugged terrain, where the orcs and goblins had the advantage of knowing the land and setting traps. The alliance suffered many losses and setbacks, but they also won some battles and liberated some towns and villages. They also encountered some allies, such as the elves of the Silverwood, who hated the orcs and goblins for destroying their forest, and the dwarves of the Ironforge, who resented the orcs and goblins for stealing their ore. The wars continued for 4 more years, with no clear end in sight. The Alliance and Grashnak's army fought in many places and many ways, from large-scale battles to small-scale skirmishes, from open fields to hidden caves, from day to night. The wars were brutal and merciless, with no quarter given or taken. The wars also took a heavy toll on both sides, as many lives were lost, many lands were ruined, and many resources were depleted. The end of the wars. The wars finally ended in 1279, when Grashnak made a desperate and fatal mistake. He had lost most of his allies, most of his soldiers, and most of his territory. He was cornered in his stronghold in the mountains, where he was besieged by the Alliance. He knew that he had no hope of winning or escaping, but he refused to surrender or negotiate. He decided to gamble everything on one last chance. He made a pact with a djinn. A djinn was a powerful and ancient being who lived in another dimension. A djinn could grant any wish, but at a terrible price. Grashnak wished for more power and more soldiers, so that he could crush his enemies once and for all. The djinn agreed to grant his wish, but in exchange, he demanded Grashnak's soul and the souls of all his followers. Grashnak accepted the deal, without caring about the consequences. He felt a surge of energy coursing through his body as he became stronger and faster than ever before. He also saw his army grow in size and strength as more orcs and goblins appeared out of thin air. He ordered them to attack the Alliance with renewed fury. The Alliance was caught off guard by Grashnak's sudden transformation and onslaught. They were overwhelmed by the sheer number and power of their foes. They fought bravely and fiercely, but they were losing ground and hope. However, not all was lost. There was still one group of heroes who could save the day, the Moonbreakers. The Moonbreakers were a team of elite adventurers who had been fighting against Grashnak's army throughout the wars. They were made up of heroes from different kingdoms who had joined forces for a common cause. They were Lila, a Valyrian mage who specialized in fire magic; Ryan, a Thalosian warrior who wielded a bow and a sword; Nara, a Lyrionian druid who could shapeshift into animals; Kato, an Illyrian sailor who used a harpoon and a net; Leon, a Norian knight who rode a horse and carried a lance. The Moonbreakers had learned about Grashnak's pact with the djinn from a spy they had planted in his camp. They knew that the only way to stop Grashnak was to kill the djinn. They also knew that the djinn was hidden in a secret chamber inside Grashnak's stronghold. They decided to infiltrate the stronghold and find the chamber while the battle raged outside. The Moonbreakers managed to sneak into the stronghold using their skills and stealth. They fought their way through guards and traps until they reached the chamber where the djinn was kept. The chamber was guarded by Grashnak himself, who sensed their presence and confronted them. Grashnak was confident that he could defeat them easily with his new power. He taunted them and challenged them to fight him. The Moonbreakers accepted his challenge without fear or hesitation. The final battle between Grashnak and the Moonbreakers was epic and legendary. It was a clash of might and magic, of skill and courage, of good and evil. The Moonbreakers used their teamwork and tactics to counter Grashnak's strength and speed. They also used their weapons and abilities to damage Grashnak's body and soul. Grashnak fought back with all his rage and hate. He used his claws and teeth to tear and bite his enemies. He also used his power and influence to summon more orcs and goblins to his aid. The battle lasted for a long time, and both sides suffered many wounds and losses. The Moonbreakers lost Kato, who was impaled by Grashnak's claw. Grashnak lost his left eye, which was burned by Lila's fireball. The battle reached its climax when Ryan managed to shoot an arrow through Grashnak's heart, causing him to fall to the ground. The Moonbreakers seized the opportunity and rushed to the chamber where the djinn was. They found the djinn inside a large metal cage, surrounded by runes and wires. The djinn looked like a man made of smoke and fire, with horns and wings. He had a smug and sinister smile on his face. The djinn greeted the Moonbreakers mockingly, and told them that they were too late. He said that he had already granted Grashnak's wish, and that nothing could undo it. He also said that he had taken Grashnak's soul and the souls of all his followers, and that he would use them to fuel his power and escape his prison. The Moonbreakers were not intimidated by the djinn's words. They knew that there was still one way to stop him, to destroy the cage that held him. They also knew that doing so would cause a massive explosion that would kill them all. The Moonbreakers decided to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. They attacked the cage with their weapons and magic, ignoring the jinn's threats and curses. They managed to break the cage's lock and open its door. The jinn realized that he had been tricked and betrayed by Grashnak. He screamed in anger and fear as he felt his power fading away. He tried to escape, but it was too late. The cage exploded with a blinding flash and a deafening roar. The explosion killed the jinn, the Moonbreakers, Grashnak, and all the orcs and goblins who had taken the jinn's power. The explosion also destroyed Grashnak's stronghold and most of the mountain. The explosion was seen and heard by everyone in the region. The Alliance was stunned and amazed by what had happened. They realized that they had been saved by the Moonbreakers' heroic act. They also realized that the wars were over. The aftermath of the wars. The Orknian Wars ended with a decisive victory for the Alliance, but also with a great cost. The wars had claimed the lives of many people, both soldiers and civilians from all kingdoms. The wars had also damaged many lands, buildings and resources from all kingdoms. The Alliance decided to honor the memory of their fallen comrades and friends, especially the Moonbreakers. They erected monuments and statues in their honor, and named places and streets after them. They also celebrated their deeds in songs and stories, which were passed down from generation to generation. The Alliance also decided to rebuild their kingdoms and restore their peace and prosperity. They agreed to maintain their alliance and friendship, and to help each other in times of need. They also agreed to respect each other's sovereignty and diversity, and to cooperate for the common good. The orcs and goblins were defeated and decimated by the wars. The Orc Kingdom was no more than a few villages and towns, spread throughout the hills. The Goblin kingdoms were reduced to scattered tribes, hiding in the mountains. The orcs and goblins lost their power and prestige, and became outcasts and pariahs in this world.